talk about Bakewo.
You get some kind of violent Bacchic ecstasy that takes things over.
Yeah, because it was an adjective to describe Dionysus in that sense.
And he's performing purgations with drugs. And these healings affect the person's soul.
The oracles will not be like just a crazy hippie in a cave doing drugs.
They were newborns when they were adopted, I'll call it adopted, by the oracles.
Everybody can experience this purgation. Is that what it means to be Bacchic?
So, hello, Evina. So, will you talk to us a bit about yourself, like just a personal intro kind of thing, if that's okay?
Yeah, hi, thank you for having me. I am Evina. I studied classics and then linguistics as my master's, which can be a bit controversial because, as you probably have guessed, there are two different worlds. They're all about language and the history, but they have like a different viewpoint. So philology is more about studying the history of language, studying the literary texts of that time, either in ancient Greek or in Latin. But I would say that linguistics is more of a different perspective on language. I understand it more as studying the language, the current language, the language that is spoken, analyzing the forms of language from the smallest part of speech, from like phonetics, to something bigger, pragmatics or semantics. So I feel like I embody both these worlds, which at times are seen, unfairly I think, are seen as contradictory, but they're not really, in my opinion. So sometimes I have that part of me that is very philology centered. So I look into the etymology of words, that fascinates me, or reading ancient texts. But on the other side, I have a very practical and applied linguistic focus on my everyday life because I teach languages. So yeah, I try to balance both these worlds in my everyday life.
Okay. And so, did you study all of this in Greece, and after you was now we are here in Chile. I should say that I knew about you because of the Colectividad Helénica, the Hellenistic collective, let's say.
Yeah.
And so through them I was invited to your course, but I was not in the city, so when I got here I couldn't enroll in your course because it was already full, which is like modern Greek. So
Yeah.
there seems to be this misconception that when you say Greek language, even for me before, you tend to think that it's the same as ancient Greek, which obviously is not. Can you elaborate a bit on the difference?
Yeah, of course. So I did study in Greece, in Athens, which is the heart of classics, really. So I did my undergrads there in classical studies, and then I moved to Edinburgh, where I studied in the linguistic department. So that was where I did my applied linguistics course and master's. And now I ended up in Chile, so I am not really in one place. I'm never stuck in one place. And since I arrived here, I was pleasantly surprised to find out that there is this colectividad, as it's called, which is a community of Greeks or of people that love learning about Greece. So it's not only people with Greek origins. and they invited me to do courses on modern Greek, which is, as you said, a bit different to ancient Greek. And there is no one way to say that, but it's a bit contradictory. It is and it is not the same as ancient Greek. So in the same sentence, I use this contradiction because it's interesting to elaborate a bit on that. So thank you for giving me that opportunity to talk a bit more on that. So they are one language. It's one language that has the same linguistic ancestors, let's say. So talking about ancient Greek, we're not talking about one language. So it's an umbrella term um, to include all of the different dialects that they used in ancient Greece. So we have there like the Attic dialect, the dialect of Athens. We have the Ionic dialect, the Aeolic dialect, and many more. So when we're talking about modern and ancient Greek, it's not even the contrast of two languages. It's a contrast of the current modern version of Greek. And on the other side, we have like many different dialects, but the common thing among all of these dialects in ancient Greece and modern Greek is that they have the same ancestor, which is the Proto-Greek. Proto means original, first Greek. And that is the connection of Greek with the Indo-European languages. So Greek, along with all the Romance languages that come from Latin and many other languages that are spoken in Europe and in other continents, are Indo-European languages. It's just a categorization of languages. So the reason why Greek, modern Greek and ancient Greek are one language is because they have the same ancestors. Now, on a practical point, I would say that there are many differences. That's why it's very interesting, like observing modern Greeks, the students that go to school, and we have like intense training in ancient Greek, even nowadays, they feel like they're learning another language, as if they were learning English, Spanish, or anything else. So they treat ancient Greek as a foreign language just because they don't understand it. I will elaborate a bit more on the differences between the two of them, but I'd like to say there that, yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of effort from the Ministry of Education, not only the current one, all of them, to maintain the same accent, the same pronunciation of modern Greek into ancient Greek. So Greece is the only place in the world that nowadays ancient Greek is read not in the original way, which is the Erasmic pronunciation, but in the modern pronunciation. So I personally was taught to read Greek, modern or ancient, in the same way. And this is not historically accurate. Having said that, now I can get into more technical differences. So starting with the phonetics or the phonology, ancient Greek was very musical, had a phonetic system that, as well as a polytonic system, so the stresses of the world, that these two combined created a very musical effect. So there were even aspirated sounds that were creating a very strong pronunciation. I don't know if anyone has listened to ancient Greek being read nowadays. It's very strong in the pronunciation and musical. Many of these elements are lost in modern Greek. Another thing that is very common is the diptobes in ancient Greek that are read as different phonemes, but in modern Greek, they're read as combinations of sounds. And then this makes a big difference. For me, for example, is not paideia, the word for education, that we can elaborate on that later on. For me, it's pedia, like pedagogy in English. So it's really different when I need to talk about ancient Greek in English with English speaking people, because there I try to adjust to the pronunciation, the original ancient Greek pronunciation that English speakers use, and not the one that I have in my head, let's say. Another thing that is really different between ancient and modern Greek is the morphology. So there are a lot of elements that are different nowadays. Ancient Greek used to be very dense. So if anyone ever gets the chance to see an ancient Greek text printed next to a modern Greek text, the translation of the ancient Greek text, they're going to see there is a big mismatch. So whatever in ancient Greek roughly takes, let's say, 5 lines in a Word document, it might take 10 in the modern Greek version. It's because ancient Greek was very concentrated, very dense. It allowed a structure where the verb would go towards the end of the sentence, which we see in Latin as well. Whereas in modern Greek, we've adapted to what most languages do, which is more of like subject, verb, and object, whatever we would use in English, like I eat an apple. But in ancient Greek, they would view it as I apple eat, which is very interesting. None of these structures, neither from ancient Greek or from Latin, has survived nowadays. People tend to talk more. So that's a difference in the way we see probably language and thinking. But I won't get into that right now because it's more cognitive. And another thing that was different in ancient Greece was the semantics of the words. So I would say that there are words that survived and mean the exact same thing as they meant in ancient Greece. For example, the word arete, which means excellence, virtue. But at the same time, many other words that survived changed their meaning. So we have the word agora, which was where they would gather to speak publicly. It was the place where political life would take place, where people would exchange opinions, where democracy started. But nowadays, agora for the average Greek person is the supermarket. So nothing like the agora of ancient Greece. And also a third leg in that semantic problem is that we sometimes maintained some words from ancient Greece into combined words like hippodrome. So that means the rail for horses. That's what a hippodrome is practically. But we don't call hippo, which was the word for horse. We don't use that word anymore in modern Greek. We use alogo, which is nothing like hippo. It doesn't have the same origins. So I would say that the main thing that keeps these languages together is their origins. It's quite hard, it's quite a challenge to go from modern Greek to ancient Greek or from ancient Greek to modern Greek. So that is for anyone that is wondering, if I learn one of the two, how easy is it to get to the other one? Well, it is easy if you have a very high level in either of them, but not very easy if you know just the basics in either of them. Does that cover your question?
Yes, and at the same time generates another one.
Love it. Let's go for it.
Which, if we take like a standpoint of using or like engaging with ancient Greek, like from a like an exercise of reconstruct history. I guess it will be important to actually, because I've heard many times this idea of the music in the words, or the way you speak, the way you do grammar, the way that you will read, was part of, if let's say if we wanted to reconstruct history, I guess it will be important to keep that as the more accurate way that we can go, as how it was being used in ancient times. Isn't that a bit what philology, from that standpoint, is related with reconstructing history?
Well, yeah, if I understand your question well, is probably it surprised you that modern Greeks do not use a pronunciation of ancient Greek, even though we are the closer, like genetically, we're closer to ancient Greeks comparing to anyone else studying it. So if that's the heart of your question, then it was, I think, an effort in modern times to make Greek people feel closer to ancient Greek, because at times in the modern history, in recent history in Greece, there's been an attempt to modernize, to get away from our inheritance and look for innovative ways to reinvent ourselves. So if I'm getting it right, depending on your question, you can jump in any moment and orientate me back to what you meant. But I feel like it's, yeah, from a philologist point of view, I like to be accurate with how things sound, how things are conjugated in a practical way, grammatically speaking. But more than all of that, I'm more interested in what was said, how it was like living in the ancient world. What were the morals? What was everyday life like? So personally, and I know that's not the same for every philologist, it doesn't worry me that much, the pronunciation, but I do appreciate it. I do appreciate the musicality in it and the history that the etymology brings. So maybe that's a controversial thing to say. So please correct me if
No,
that was
it's perfect. I guess yes, and also I was going into the idea of how these words that we can have now, that still survive, are actually a source to understand history. Because you can have, let's say, archaeology, but somehow it will give you will have to guess a bit more, I guess, if you are trying to understand what an artifact was used for or something like that. But with words, if that, I guess what is impressive also is how you can actually create a system for you to understand what they were, how they were using it, and what they were, because probably the words had a different meaning depending also how it was being used, I guess, and in what context or whatever. But the fact that and correct me if I'm wrong, the fact that the philologist's work will actually be accurate in how this hypothetical word was being used at that time will give us, as you were saying, like the everyday life, the things, how they were, I don't know, eating, partying, or whatever, So that's where I was going, like the importance of actually understand what a word means will give you more graphically and more accurate than even archaeology, I guess. But I guess also both of them sometimes catch with each other. Yeah?
And I have a comment on that. That was very beautifully said. So I don't have much to add to that, but something just occurred that I wanted to share. The reason why I feel is so beautiful studying the ancient things is because if we realize words are abstract sounds that someone at some point decided to call the table, table, the water, water, right? So if we come to the origin of the words and we think how ancient Greeks came up with words for concepts that they observed for the first time, that is the interesting thing. And then take it from there, what they called arete, the excellence, the virtue, that was the center of attention in education in ancient Greece. So how did they decide that that thing of being good and brave and courageous was called arete and not whatever else? X. Okay. There is no knowledge on why they decided these three syllables, arete, to explain that concept. So I wanted to add that to what you're saying because it goes even before the idea of taking the words from the ancient Greeks and understanding and reconstructing the world is the idea that they came up with things and words and concepts that sometimes we're trying to understand where they got them from.
So they were kind of actively creating words.
Yeah. And many names, even if you think of myths, of gods, of anything we know about Greek mythology, many times it's interesting to see how the names given to certain heroes or protagonists of stories can be dissected etymologically, and they mean what that person is. So, for example, we might get into that later, but just an example that dawned on me is the name Medusa, which comes from a verb that in ancient Greek meant to protect, because at some point she was a priestess in the temple of Athena, of goddess Athena. So she was, in a way, a protector of worshipping Athena. So did the myth first got created and then we gave the name Medusa to her because of her identity? Or because of her name, she became a protector of the temple?
That's amazing, because actually that's in the overview. In the overview, at the end, so we'll get into that for sure. Actually, it was part of a very long conversation I had with Ammon Hillman and the Medusa as a guardian, and so that's great. But I will try to keep on track, because if not, I will I will go everywhere. But we'll go back to
I
it.
could have used a different example.
No, it's perfect. So Evina, also there is this question that I have in these technicalities we're talking. Like, can you explain a bit, like in a nutshell, what is the difference between philology and linguistics?
Yeah, I touched upon that, and I said that probably it's controversial to say that I embody both worlds, right? So philology is more like studying the language of a certain time. And if it is classical philology, then yeah, of course we can talk about the ancient times. But a philologist could be analyzing the texts of a certain time, of like the medieval time or of any time in history, of whatever interest for that philologist. So it's mostly reconstructing what you said before, the world around the time of the text is occurring. So understanding why certain things are written in that way in this specific text, what it meant, that word then, and how it has changed today. So it's more the study around certain texts and what comes out of these texts. So we would know nothing about ancient Greece, for example, if there weren't classical philologists studying the texts, understanding what it meant, every single thing said there, reconstructing the idea of how the society was, what was right, what was wrong, how things worked, how the city was governed. And on the other hand, we wouldn't be able to appreciate all this knowledge on words and language without the linguistics. So, in my view, linguistics is very important because, of course, it focuses on the spoken word today, but it's the language we use to explain and understand anything in our lives. So linguistics likes the idea of thinking and language being interconnected. And without language, we wouldn't be able to talk about things. So it's a different viewpoint, but it's, in my opinion, important to have both viewpoints when you look at something. So I love reading the ancient Greek texts, and this is a big part of what I've done and what I'm interested in continuing doing. But I wouldn't be able to appreciate these texts without my inquiry on the words, on how the pragmatics worked back then, how one thing meant certain thing then, and how it means a different thing today. So I feel like I need to balance both these things when I have a certain research interest, let's say. Does that answer your question?
Yes, absolutely.
Good.
Thank you. So, if we keep going with the, let's speak up because it will be interesting to go into like take a time machine kind of thing as a philologist that you are, and with the both approach that you just said to us. So I guess it will be interesting to set ourselves in like after Bronze Age, then let's say Homer times.
Yeah.
That will be the 8th, I guess.
Yes. Good.
And how this well, I guess, who is Homer?
Good question. So Homer, if if he existed to start with, that says a lot about what I'm going to say later. But if he existed, you're right, he probably lived around the second half of the 8th century, and this would be the archaic times, as they're called, roughly from the 9th to the 6th century, obviously before Common Era. So I'll address the part if he existed a bit later, because it has to do more with the Homer question, and I will explain later what that is. So Homer, to start with the name, because that's a good example I could have used before. Homer, the name Homer, even in modern Greek, it means hostage. So like taken as a prisoner or given as a guarantee in a negotiation. There are some folk and popular etymologies where they take the word Homer and they say that this first part, roughly, I will explain it roughly, this in the beginning means the opposite, the way we use anti something. And this last bit, this R, especially in Homer, comes from the verb orao, which means to see. So according to that folk etymology, that meant that he was blind. And that's why he had this name, or this name was given to him because he was blind. As we said before, there is this uncertainty of, does the chicken do the egg, or the hen the chicken? Yeah, this confusion with etymology. But we believe that this is folk etymology. So that was what his name meant. Probably, according to popular culture, because he had a stick, because he was blind and he needed to be guided. Whatever the truth is, Homer was a rhapsode. Nothing to do with Bohemian Rhapsody, because he lived way before that. But rhapsodes in ancient Greece were partly composers of poems and partly performers, like actors/musicians. The word rhapsode, it has in it the word ode, ode, which means music. So the rhapsodes, that raps in the beginning means stitches. So what they were doing, it was stitching up songs. So weaving together different parts of extracts of already known poems. The question there is, who composed those poems? That's another question, and I'm going to try and answer a bit later on that. But the point is that Homer was a composer and a performer, and they were very popular at that time. They were taking part in symposia, which were big celebrations, feasts, taking place in the houses of the aristocrats of the time, and they were quite frequent. They were taking place maybe once a month, because they were taking place during the monthly festivals, and each of these festivals were dedicated to a different god from the 12 gods. So every once in a while, roughly every month, there would be this kind of symposia where rhapsodes were invited to perform for the audience gathered. So that is what Homer was. Okay. So Homer composed, again, with a lot of stars. Did he exist? Did he compose? We'll see later. But let's say he composed a lot of epic poems and epic lyric poetry. But I'm going to focus today on Iliad and Odyssey, which are the most famous poems from Homer. So this epic poetry means that is very long poems, thousands of verses, like the Iliad has, I don't know, 15,700 verses, something like that. It's insanely long, and it only talked about an idealized past, a glorious past, where heroic and like admirable actions took place. So Homer, as we said, he lived, he lived around the end of the 8th century, but he talked about the Trojan War that took place in the 12th century, so 4 centuries before him. And he talked about the war in Troya during the Iliad, the first poem that was composed. And he didn't even talk for the 10 years of the war. He talked for the last few days of the war, on the 10th and last year of the war. And then we have the story of Odysseus in Odyssey, other thousands of verses there, which is the 10-year-long trip of Odysseus back home, because he was the king of Ithaca, which is a Greek island that still exists and has the same name. So he was the king of Ithaca, and he wanted to come back from Troy to his kingdom, to his family in Ithaca. So that is the main thing that Homer composed and what he's famous for. Well, we can talk more about the morals in these poems when we talk about education, maybe. But for now, you've seen that I've left a lot of hints and question marks. So the interesting thing there is the idea that Homer existed or not, he did compose or not the poem, so he composed just one. So there was the father of philology, Friedrich Wolff, that in the 18th century he composed, he published, let's say, some of these poems, and in the intro of this book talked about the Homer question. That entry of the book was called Prolegomena ad Homerum. Prolegomena means an introduction to Homer in Latin there. So that question that he posed was more of a doubt than a question, because he didn't really ask us anything. He just doubted the fact that it's possible to have one single person composing two poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey, that first of all, they have some gaps in the narration. Second, they have different linguistic elements in them. So the Iliad, according to philologists, it comes first because it has some linguistics elements that are more archaic, more ancient than the language that is used in the Odyssey. So in the mind of Wolff, how is it possible that the same person composes two poems and uses different language in each of them? So we have the gaps in the narration, we have the different linguistic elements, and that was what made Wolff think that it is not possible that we have a unique composer for both of them. So he didn't believe in a sole author for both of these poems. He rather feels that Homer is part of a collective oral tradition. He's part of a chain of rhapsodes, as I said before, that was his job, that probably decided to put these poems in this order. He decided to stitch up these extracts of these already known, probably poems, in that specific order. There, I have to say that what I said about this specific order, both of these poems start in medias res, so in the middle of the things. So they don't have a linear plot. That's what I want to say. We don't see, for example, Odysseus packing his things and leaving Troy to go to Ithaca. No, it starts like somewhere in the middle of his expedition, of his adventure to go back home. So probably it could be Homer that decided that that's how this story is going to be narrated, in media res, in the middle of the things. Or at the same time, we can think of the reality of rhapsodes. So rhapsodes were invited in big parties, right? So if the audience was bored, or if the audience didn't like that specific part of the story, the rhapsode would speed up, would probably leave out certain parts of the plot and go to the parts of the texts that were known to the public. These stories were known to the public, and the rhapsody would choose a part of the story that was more interesting, that provoked maybe more emotions to the audience. Because it was interactive, it wasn't like a performer on a stage with a pre-decided script and the pre-decided staging and all of that. No, it was interactive. So we have, like in texts, references where the rhapsode would sit in a very beautiful chair. So he would stand out in a group of people, but he wasn't seated at a high altitude where he can be seen by everyone. He was part of the group. So in that sense, it was a very interactive action. It wasn't just a performance that was predetermined. So coming back to Woolf, to the father of philology that posed that question/doubt, there were many reasons that made him think that probably Homer was not the unique composer of the poems. But at the same time, we are not sure if he even existed. So the question if he did compose them or not is not valid if we're not historically sure, we don't have evidence that he existed. So there the thing is very complicated. But for me, what matters, that's a personal opinion, is that even if it is a single composer, or if it is a collective chain effect effort of multiple rhapsodes, what matters at the end of the day is that in the Hellenistic times, from the 4th century and on, from the 4th century before the Common Era and on, some scholars, some philologists of the time, did a very important job. They collected all the first writings of the Homer epics, and they did a profound philological work and preserved those texts for us today. So that's what matters to me the most, is that we got to read, at the end of the day, the Iliad and the Odyssey. And what matters less is the personality of Homer. Mind as well there that at the time of Homer, we hadn't received yet the Phoenician alphabet. So the Greek alphabet is based on the Phoenician alphabet. Phoenicians were known to be very good merchants. So they would travel around the Mediterranean, and that was when we got in touch with them and we got the alphabet. The Greeks added the vowels to this alphabet, and that was when we started writing down. So that happened a bit later than the time of Homer. So that adds a bit of credit to what Wolf said, that Homer spoke in a certain version, the Homeric epics, but how we got to the point of writing them down, which was probably around the time of the tyrant Pisistratus, the 6th century in Athens. So there is a distance of more than 100 years. So there were other rhapsodes that preserved these epics and preserved the word of Homer and probably made some changes. So what we got today is the epics. I don't know if they're Homer's or someone else's, but we are lucky to have them. That's my conclusion, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. Like that, what you were saying about the personality of it, of does this person actually exist? Did this person actually existed or not? I guess it's the importance and actually what we are trying to understand with not having any background on like you know, that's why we try to speak with people like you, is actually we're pursuing with that idea of we're not trying to see if Odysseus was real or not. We're just trying to see and try to reconstruct from a historically point of view what the text is saying. So that's why we choose this approach of philology and not going from an approach of archaeology, let's say, or not that we're leaving it out. It's just like it makes a lot of sense to us that we are creating this documentary to take it from that perspective, because actually before we started with this first script, we didn't even know much how like what philology even meant. So when we started to understand it a bit more, obviously the focus for us was we choose to go from that perspective. So it's very important to us for you to give us the even your opinion on what is what you think is the most important, which it will not be the personality, it will be more what comes out of the text, isn't it?
Absolutely. And just a note there for the archaeology that you mentioned. There's been excavations in modern Turkey and the northwest of modern Turkey, and that's where we think that Troy was. So there was at some point the Trojan War. For that, we're sure. If Homer existed, we're not sure, though. But it's all the narrations that come out of that war and all the morals that are like interconnected with this story.
Yes, and I guess that's exactly where I would like to go. Like, so this story of this concept or person that give us the Odyssey and the Iliad, or the Iliad and the Odyssey. So it will be used during Hellenistic times as an educational tool or something like that.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing it was used is that it was used not only in Hellenistic times, which is a lot later, but it was used almost in the contemporary times of Homer as a tool for education. So, well, I'll get into the education topic if that's all right, because Homer is on every time, even until today. He's part of the educational system in modern Greece. So he's been present even though in every different time, like the classical or the Hellenistic times, at the same time, there is a parallel interest into philosophy or into rhetoric, but Homer has been a constant, if that makes sense. So, well, in the 9th century, at the time of Homer, let's say a bit before Homer, there was no formal education, there were no formal schools, and the education of the people was a responsibility of the household or of the community. But since the time of Homer, his epics served as lessons, let's say, on arete that I mentioned before, which was the excellence, the virtue, because there were role models like Achilles in the Iliad or like Odysseus in the Odyssey. But also there were good examples of what bravery meant, because, well, in the Iliad, we have a lot of war scenes, or in the Odyssey, we see how resilient Odysseus is. So that was a sign of bravery. But we also get other ideas and lessons on loyalty or on even on cunning or on piety. So they are, I would say, heavy on morals. And that was why Homer served as a pedagogue, as a teacher of moral identity for ancient Greeks. So moving on more towards the 8th century, so I'm taking it way before the Hellenistic times you asked me, because I feel like it's important to show that he's been a constant in education. So from the 8th century on, when we actually had some elements of more formal education, in the sense that there was sort of a curriculum. Music, physical education were important as literacy or literature.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Evina. Just in that topic. So you said there was. Could we say it would be fair to say that it was like three pillars of the educational idea? That it will be, as you were saying, music,
physical education.
like the physical fitness, I guess,
Yeah.
know how to wrestle or whatever. We that like to wrestle, me and my brothers and everybody in the project.
There you go. You're answering great. I know something about music. You're interested about in that as well. So you're ready.
Actually, that was we didn't know about that when we started also with the project. So it has been very interesting how a lot of things are making us understand how we are very influenced still nowadays. So that's why I just interrupt you a little bit with that
No, of
idea
course,
of
go ahead.
these pillars of the education. So you said music was as important as the physical fitness or gymnasium
Yeah.
concept, and grammar, I guess, is the other one. Or
Yeah, grammar, we'll put there literacy, grammar, literature, all of it as language, let's call it, okay?
as far
That
as
would
the
have.
8th century, we already see this. That's amazing.
Mhm. Yeah, as early as the 8th century. And that is when we start having that idea. It's like a saying in ancient Greek that says that the body and the soul should be in balance. That's the ideal. So that literally translated from ancient Greek, the healthy soul lives in a healthy body. So that makes physical education equally important to spiritual development through music, or to as well to literacy development that comes with moral education and other things that we can talk about that a bit later, but they're equally important because nowadays they're like secondary courses at school, right? You get an hour of music, and if you're lucky, 2 hours of physical education, nothing more, right? Um,
Exactly.
well,
That's why I think it's important to approach it and to actually, because it makes so much sense if you think
mhm.
about it. Like if you are actually going for integral, like
Yeah, integral, holistic.
yeah, idea of education, of course you will give at least a third to the body.
Yeah, exactly. So
And the creativity part of it, like the artistic um, mind setup, or I don't know how to put it in English, but
yeah, no, exactly that.
yeah. So
So if you think about it, it must have been really cool being a student back then, right? I think of the students I've had over the years in like public schools, and I think of how much cooler it would be to be a student back then. So having equal time of music and physical education and literacy, let's call them all of that, literacy lessons, it must have been really cool. Even the literacy lessons, so when you have teachings about morals in the form of a fun performance from a grammatist that probably has great skills into being a rhapsode as well. There's nothing like that nowadays. I mean, when I had to teach history, I had to get into the class and literally talk for a while, you know. So that was nothing like that. It was more interactive. It's a fun history lesson to have, or literacy lesson, but it's also important to have music and physical education. So that is maybe the seed of what education was for ancient Greeks. So that is what we start calling paideia, which in my head is pedia, for the reasons I explained before, which in everyone else's head is education, okay? Just to translate from all of the languages we all speak. So paideia is the same root as the word pedagogy that we use today, but very different at the same time. Because nowadays the word pedagogy means teaching tools. So if I study pedagogy, I study as a teacher, from a perspective as a teacher, how to teach, how to transmit knowledge. But pedagogy back then was not at all what the teacher was doing. Pedagogy was the preparation, the moral preparation of the students with different focuses every time. Maybe in the 8th century, the focus was more on individual development, and maybe later on, when we have the democracy, and we talk about the classical Athens and the democratic system there, that is when maybe the education had more of a goal of preparing students to be good citizens. So different focuses, but the heart of it, it's the same. Okay, it's the preparation. At that moment, I think it would be interesting to go towards the end of the archaic period, just before classical Athens, because there we start having more formalized educational institutions. They look different in every city-state, because I keep saying ancient Greece and ancient Greece, but ancient Greece was not a country, was just different city-states that at times of history felt more connected to each other, and they would form, let's say, parts in wars, as we know, like the Peloponnese War or the Peloponnese city-states against Athens. But they were not one thing. Anyway, I'll keep saying ancient Greece for the purposes of this conversation. Is that okay? Just to
Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect.
okay,
Though
we'll call it
I was
ancient
just
Greece.
yeah, but that's actually is a very important point, I guess. Because we know when we were talking the other day that we didn't record, and also the conversations I've been having with Ammon, it's like, yeah, you might have an idea that Greece was something like modern Greece, but bigger, but it's not actually like that. It will be more like different states, as you're saying, with probably some differences, but they had this thing that kind of make them part of the same culture, which I guess was a language.
Yeah, exactly. Which again had many differences, because if someone has the ability to read ancient Greek, and they read, let's say, the ancient Greek text of Plato, which is in Attic, and then you get the Homeric epics on the side, you'll see that it's quite different, but it's not that you cannot understand it. I mean, there are some differences that still allow you to access the content and understand it. So yeah, I totally agree with what you said, that it's the languages, the dialects that keep them together and facilitated as well the communication. So anyway, I'll keep calling it ancient Greece, and maybe another time we can talk about what it means being Greek. And the word Greek itself is not Greek. It's how the Turkish people called the Greeks a few centuries before, right? We call ourselves Hellenes. Yeah, nothing to do with the word Greek. So a long conversation, but I'll put it in the freezer for now. So so at the end of the archaic period, more formal institutions, educational institutions were formed, with different approach in each of them. For example, in Athens, they would concentrate on the preparation of the citizens for whatever reason, for taking positions as statesmen, or later on for being participatory citizens. But in Sparta, for example, they had these camps, military camps, where they would train and get ready for the war. So they looked very different, but they were still formalized educational institutions. Okay, that's what matters. Even at that time, Homer remained foundational. He was like a constant in the curricula. It could be that he was taught, that his poems were taught more, let's say, at the basis of the education, like in the first literacy teachings that kids would get at an early age. So it was like the cornerstone of literacy, and maybe not that much as it served before as like a history lesson, the morals that I mentioned before. The role of the Homeric epics maybe shrunk to literacy goals, let's say. But in the classical times, in Athens, let's concentrate on Athens, because as I said, there were quite a few differences between city-states. We had more of a democratic pedagogy. So that was when we have a lot more formal educational institutions, and the goal was more to prepare the people, the citizens, with these values that the emerging democracy needed. So prepare them to participate in public life. So they were cultivating citizens, let's say. A comment here. Education still was merely restricted to free-born males. So it wasn't really something for everyone. Okay, there was no such thing for a very long time. So the free-born males are obviously the ones that don't have any connection to slavery. They're the ones that have the right to be part of the Olympic Games, because as we said before, physical education was a column, a pillar in education. So it was extremely important to be athletic and a big honor to be part of the Olympic Games if you were a freeborn male. They were the ones that also had political power. They had the right to vote. And that was when the pedagogical goals were more concentrated into the public life rather than the aristocratic training for the elites.
I'm sorry, Evina, that I interrupt you, but
No,
just connected with it. I know it's not in the overview, but just for me not to forget to ask you, because you were saying for free males, and what do you think about this education idea also for women that was named like the oracles? So we were talking the other day about we know that aristocracy, let's say, was obviously getting a different treatment in the education, I guess, from the whole culture. And but we talked about how you will train an oracle, and it seems to be like from early age and just
Very early age, 0 almost.
and very high educated also in these three pillars. Like you will get the oracles will not be like just a crazy hippie in a cave doing drugs, like people might think. It was actually like highly educated, a highly educated woman or kid that becomes a woman after, what do you think about that? Just to make the parallel about what a free male will be doing and what a free woman will be, or kid.
Yeah. Putting a lot of quotation marks there while you're talking.
Yeah, sorry.
No, the free woman is because that woman did not choose. They were newborns when they were adopted. I'll call it adopted by the oracles. So yeah, the first 10 years of their lives, they would have intense education. The next 10 years, they would serve as priests in the oracle, or they would serve as Pythia, because Pythia was not one woman. It was a role that was for everyone that would have the gift to serve in an oracle. And the last 10 years, from roughly 20 to 30 years, they would be responsible for training the new blood, the newborn girls that were donated to the oracle. So in that sense, I find it incredible that there was a space for women, even though they hadn't chosen it. They weren't aware. It wasn't a conscious decision. But maybe it was more of a conscious decision in Sparta, where women as well were military trained. So I think there are a lot of aspects of femininity that are interesting to explore in ancient Greece through myths, because, well, of course, we get the idea that women were at home. The free women that had no connection to slavery, their only purpose in ancient Athens was to bring up kids. They would stay at home. They wouldn't be part of the public life. So in that sense, we feel that, women had no role in ancient Greece, 0. But as you mentioned, with the oracles, in Sparta, with the military training, through myths, we're going to talk about Medusa later, there are a lot of elements in ancient Greece that show that women did not have that of a limited role as we think nowadays that they had. It's a long conversation. I really want to
Yeah,
get into
I know, because actually this has been our central point, I guess, for the past 6 months. Like actually, we haven't been talking too much about the male role. Let's say we've been diving a lot more into the oracle. So and because, as you were saying, we have a vibe of or not a vibe. I always say vibe, and I don't want to say
a
that
feeling.
word.
Yeah.
Or not even that, because I guess that if you are not studying it like actively, or having classes, or you will get the idea that is in the collective, that obviously is connected with what we see in the movies, or what you see in the with this idea, which has pretty much nothing to do with the actual thing that we can get from text that was happening. So actually we were tracking the cult through the oracles, like let's say the religious practices they had, the initiation rites, as I was telling you before, and the mystery rites, and how can we trace it back to Bronze Age and all of that. And obviously the importance of the woman in all of these institutions, even of the oracles, were like I guess the question I wanted to say is like how politically or like in the actual way that the culture or the city or the state will work, how strong the word of an oracle will be, like as a king, as a, you know, what an oracle says, how important it is for everybody.
It's the most important because it's the divine word. It's not challenged. There's no doubt on it. What it said is followed word by word, if it can be understood, right? Because that's another story on how complex sometimes in their simplicity the readings in an oracle can be. So that's another conversation, but they were never challenged, they were never doubted. Kings and heads of states, city-states, never challenged them. So, well, we have a whole literary history. Like if we read Oedipus, both of the texts of Oedipus, it's based on what an oracle said, right? That you will get killed by your own son. So that's it. We have like two whole tragedies based on that. Yeah, it was never doubted, but just to add something in the role of women, even out of the oracles, because yeah, the oracles drove the political things, obviously, but even out of the oracles, we do have examples of important women like Aspasia, the partner, I'll call her, the partner of Pericles, that was taking part in the symposia and was listening to all the political conversations, and she had like a strong word in things, and she would influence Pericles, this important politician, quite a lot. So I honestly believe that there is misconception that, yeah, women stayed at home, full stop, and that democracy in ancient Greece was just for men. But we keep understanding, the more we read the texts, that that was not the absolute truth.
Yes, I wanted to take that a bit of that direction to connect it with the whole topics we've been exposing actually, and giving it in our YouTube channel, which has been very centrated, not absolutely obviously, but a big topic for us has been these oracles. It takes your attention, of course.
Of course, because the best example of the role of women.
Yeah, and well, I guess that takes us to another. I thought I was muted. To another thing that I would like to ask you, which is here in the overview. When we talk about the views, the philosophical view, or which is, I guess, a big part of the mentality of the culture, there is this concept of what is Socratic or pre-Socratic, and well, I thought that it was just to time frame stuff. Maybe it is. I don't know. But I know now.
So well.
I've been reading this one. You know this one? Yeah, I guess you know this one.
There you go. Yeah, that's
The Kirk and Raven and
Bible.
Schoeffer. Yeah, so try to see differences in on it, and
Okay.
the concept of
I could elaborate on that. Yeah, what is your question?
well, just just the concept of Socratic and pre-Socratic.
Okay.
Can you give us an idea of what it is?
Yeah. You gave me the best introduction because you said something that is really important. That idea of pre-Socratic, because that prefix there, pre-Socratic, gives us the impression that is a timeline, right? So is that they were before Socrates. But to be honest with you, this term that was, if I'm not wrong, first used by Herman Diels, and maybe in the late 19th century, it it can be interpreted in a very wrong way. So it is a chronological term because it uses pre, that as a prefix means before Socrates, but the actual truth is some of them were contemporaries to Socrates and to Plato. So it's not accurately used as a chronological term. Also, in my opinion, it involves a bit of superstition, like the idea that whatever comes before the classical philosophy of ancient Greece, the important, in many quotation marks, classical period of philosophy of Plato, of Aristotle, of Socrates himself, obviously, whatever comes before that could be or is inferior to Socrates and Plato, because by using the very word Socrates and putting there pre-Socrates means that whatever comes before Socrates. So it makes you feel like whatever comes before Socrates is not as important. And just to mention that the word philosophers there, pre-Socratic philosophers, that is what bothers me even more, in the sense that they were not they were not identifying themselves as philosophers at all. They were identifying themselves as inquirers into many things, like a big, vast variety of things. As I'm going to elaborate on a bit more, they really focused on cosmos, on the origins of the world, that what cosmos was. And they talked about chemistry, they talked about all the common sciences, physics, geology, astronomy, and of course they covered some topics in theology, metaphysics, and ethics.
Yes, I'm sorry. That's what caught also our attention. That how deep was what they were talking before. Like they were actually not trying to. I mean, I guess it gets very evident that they were trying to explain physics, like from a scientific perspective, more than a well, probably science and religion and intuition. I don't know. It will not it will not be as separated as we have nowadays, which it will be like everything religious is in some department and nothing to do
Yeah.
with science. So that's what we thought that it was very interesting to show that the view of the pre-Socratics, let's say.
Yeah. So it's what you said. They had a lot of interests, and well, what we learn about them is unfortunately through fragments. So we don't have any whole entire book by any of the pre-Socratic philosophers because they were not saved. But what we do have is I don't know, comments of their contemporary historians, of later philosophers that were probably challenging what they were saying, or we have like testimonia, like fragments in other people's work, where they would sometimes quote them. So we have quotations from them, but the analysis under this quotation would be of that philosopher that would challenge them, agree with them, or of a historian that would mention what it was said for whatever reason that served their book. let's say, their composition. So what we know for sure is that the pre-Socratics, I'm going to get into some examples of what they were talking about and mention some important names. But what is more important is that they set the foundations for naturalism and rationalism. Naturalism is the idea that everything is governed by natural laws, and rationalism that we still have in philosophy nowadays. So at the same time, they of course contributed into modern philosophy, but they paved the way for scientific investigation. So when we have pre-Socratic philosophers investigating the ultimate basis, the origin of the external world, the arche, the beginning, the arche in ancient Greek, of many things, the material principle that started the whole world, which was later said by other scientists that it was the Big Bang, right? Well, for pre-Socratic philosophers, it was other things. The arche, for example, for Thales, from Miletus, for him, it was water. Water that was the base of everything. For other ones was the air. Or we have later Heraclitus talking about fire as the origin of everything. Or Anaximander earlier for the unlimited, the apeiron, as the beginning of everything, which can be quite confusing.
Yes, that's amazing, Evina. I guess we can keep diving a bit more on this, and I will, because I have this, Ammon is writing to me. So if you don't mind, I would like to introduce you to.
Oh, that would be a pleasure. And then we can talk about the Socratic leg of your question.
We can dive a bit in the pre-Socratic still because it's a big one, and yeah, then we. So I will let him in. Doctor, you there? Well, I have to. Good, and you. I have to do the the audio thing. So I'll just. Here's Evina. This is Dr. Ammon Evina. I have talked to Ammon about you, and I've talked to you about Ammon a bit, just a bit.
Well, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm not sure why you talked about me to Dr. Ammon. I mean, we know him. He's great in what he's doing, incredible work, and I know he's helped a lot in the podcast. And I mean, I feel we're all lucky to have you around.
Evina, please don't call me Dr. Ammon. Just call me Ammon. That sounds so funny. I'm glad to be able to meet you and to chat, and I'm looking forward. I want to probe your background too. Could you just let me know a little bit about where your strengths are and the things that really drive you, the things that you're really interested in?
Yeah, sure. So, well, I studied classics, obviously, that's why I'm here, in Athens. And the reason why I studied classics was because I was always fascinated by the world of etymology on one leg, and on the other leg, by the world, the ancient world. And I've always wondered how life would be, and reading texts, original ones, even more. It makes you feel more connected to that world. So I was always fascinated by that. Then I strove away from that world and I studied linguistics. So a betray, right?
An errant philologist. What happened? You went into the no. That's beautiful. Do you have any favorite, ancient authors? Are you drawn to anybody in particular?
I have a soft spot for tragedies. Like I love it. Well, of course, I studied Homer from the original text. I love it. obviously. The language itself is so beautiful in the original form. But I really do like generally theater. So I'm really drawn into reading ancient texts. I always try to go and see the modern versions of tragedies. I find it very interesting. I don't know if you found yourself in any time in Epidaurus, Epidavros, called now, I have that struggle with the pronunciation. You probably understand me.
Yes, no, that's okay. That's okay. You know how it is. I went to graduate school with Tom and Kiki from, they were Spartans. They're just pure up Spartans. But they, it's the same thing. And I have to apologize a little bit because I really like to stress the fact that modern Greek does not have the coining capacity. People are not coining anymore on a daily basis, that the language is somehow shut off, like our English, where we are not functioning at that higher level that the Greek artists are functioning at. And I've always been fascinated by the transition to modern Greek. You, as a person who've been exposed to both, who've been in both of those arenas, do you find that the ancient Greek is challenging on a level that kind of reflects our own operating systems that are insufficient? Do you feel that way about Mother Greek, that she's just that much more profoundly powerful?
Um, well, that's a big thing to say. But well, as I said before to Bruno, um, I find it a bit sad that modern Greeks feel like ancient Greek is a completely different language. And there's been a lot of effort to change that view. That's why we've maintained, actually, we use the modern Greek accent pronunciation to read ancient Greek. It is an effort, it's a last resort to maybe convince people that it's not a different language. So, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
Um,
no, no, and you're exactly right that it's not a different language. It is a language that has been dragged down from a height, and people have been fighting this ever since the Byzantine scholars came in and said, "Hey, we need to bring back that purity." Look what Galen did,
Katareu,
trying to bring back. I
up
thoroughly,
until
I am completely convinced that that seed of Mother Greek is still there, despite what has happened to modern Greek, despite the slowdown. I think, and the people have that core. If you can reform the language, if you can bring it back up to its purity, that is, take off all the restrictions that Catharavison enforces, and stop the simplification and bring back the language that causes its users to create vocabulary. And I would also say meter as well, music as well, because I think that's what the big deal about Sappho's new meter is, and because she's using the language. And I don't know, is that too? It sounds like I'm being harsh on modern Greek, but
no.
I think modern Greek could be elevated to its real, glorious form. I don't know. How are the modern Greeks now getting educated in Homer? Do the kids still have to take Homer in high school?
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh, it will really hurt you if I tell you that it's only from translated text, translated to modern Greek. Sorry. And I have more bad news for you. So it's only 4 years, the obligatory education in ancient Greek. It starts in the beginning of secondary school. Sorry, there I'm using more British, my British past. So secondary school from the age of 12 until the age of 16 is the obligatory education on ancient Greek. So they learn the basics in grammar, some words in ancient Greek. They read very small extracts, mainly from historians, because it's easier to follow. And at the same time, they read tragedies or Homer from translation. And then at the age of 16, they have the choice there to choose the topics they want to do for the last 2 years of school. And that is where you decide if you're going to take the path of the future, science and computers, or the boring one, Greek. And I was one of the very few people at school, maybe among 9 students, that chose that path. Well, yeah.
Isn't that
That's
gorgeous?
the raw reality.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can I ask just a little bit for ourselves here and for audience? Like at the beginning, Ammon, you used this word. I'm sure I'm not gonna pronounce it well, but it was like koine. What you meant? Because I guess I was talking with Evina before when she was talking to us about this this ability to create words constantly in with ancient Greek. What you meant about this koine, with something related with that, Ammon?
Yes, it is. Because as Evina will know, Greek has a history of rises and falls. There are periods when the language is very specifically oriented towards that formation of new vocabulary. And then there are low points where the language is becoming common and it is less interactive. The person is less able to create their own vocabulary. So you get standardization. And people have traditionally called that koine, right? And Evina's linguistics will, this is all the laws of how the language works and everything. So
Okay.
she'll understand that
Thank you.
completely. But the problem is that when you drop from that higher elevated form that has a very advanced vocabulary to a lower form that is not as structurally flexible, you not only lose vocabulary and the ability to make it, but you lose a flexible grammar that allows you to do specific things that, they're like moves in gymnastics. It allows you to perform certain moves that you can't with a common a form of the language that's been kind of dumbed down. And in antiquity, they are fighting. Greek speakers from all over the place, all over the Mediterranean, are fighting over the purity, the power of that language. And they're led by people, second sophistics. They're led by people who are bringing, trying to elevate the language again. And that's what I think, when Evina talks about the people in Greece and what their desires are, and I know not a lot go down the track that you did to get back to the Mother Greek, but I studied with 2 of them at the University of Wisconsin through a PhD, and they are very well aware, because of their exposure, their forced exposure. They're very well aware of this, how the language can drop and rise, and it's so confusing. Evina, let me ask you this. Have you noticed that seminaries, religious educations, tend to create these fake worlds where when they bring you like Greek, for example, they'll tell you there's a difference between Koine Greek, which is just the common Greek, and the Attic Greek of Athens in the tragedies that you're so loving to read, right? You can put Aeschylus next to the New Testament, right? And you can just study the differences in the language. You can see what's happening, the flexibility. And for some reason, churches tend to perpetuate this, by, I've had people come to me and say, but wait a minute, Koine is not ancient Greek or classical Greek. And it's just like, oh my God, people, what are you smoking? What is it? It just, I don't know. What is your linguistics
Absolutely
background?
right.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know if many people know that, but in a Greek church, yeah, everything that is heard nowadays in the Greek church is that koine, the language of the New Testament. It's ridiculous, in my opinion, because people still don't understand it. We've already talked about the disconnection of modern Greeks from ancient Greek language, but even later forms of it. So I find it ridiculous because most people go to church and they don't even understand what's happening.
Right. Right. Isn't that something? Isn't it something? Look, oh God, thank you for saying it. Oh, it's so good to get that perspective.
I I even need to make a whole syntax and everything in my head if I get to be in a place where this is read. Because yeah, of course I studied that, but that doesn't mean that I'm not like, oh, that was the verb, so that was the subject, and that's what's going on in my mind. It's crazy. Imagine the average person that doesn't get any training in ancient Greek because 4 years is nothing. What do you
Right.
learn? The conjugations of verbs and
Right.
the cases in nouns, nothing else.
Yeah. It's amazing that we can still open up, that we still have access to that font that
Yeah.
is there. It's sitting there. And the spark that you have for those tragedies, like why is that when you get into the language and when you're being, oh God, it restructures your mind and the way that you think. It orders it.
The
I don't know.
syntax, the
It's
morphology itself. Let's not even get to the ideas that are transmitted from these texts.
yeah.
Let's talk barely about anything else but the words.
Yes. And
It's
the
I talked
organization
about that,
of
the order of words, for example, that is
yeah.
so different in ancient Greece. And now we all follow the same motive, like in English, subject, verb, object.
Yeah.
And I was saying the example, I eat an apple, and that was
Yeah.
I an apple
Yeah.
eat
Yeah.
back then every morning. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
We've
very
been
strange.
we've been barbarianized. We've been turned into those people who weren't speaking that melodious, beautiful, gorgeous Greek. And people don't understand. But just the use of particles. There's something in ancient Greek called a particle. And these particles basically tell you the relations between previous sentences and the sentence that you are working on. They will tell you where you are within the entire structure of the written word. And by the way, you don't need to see a verb, people, until 8 lines later. You can keep all of this juggling. How are
Yeah.
they able? The first time I was sitting in Homer and I was reading to it, I was like, wait a minute, that one thought, that one sentence, we would say, was 8 lines long.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right? How did we keep track of, oh, look at the particles and they're setting things up in the people's brains that are using it, that
And
they can string out this music. It's not bar 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 English bar 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 bar.
don't say, I have a part of me that's a linguist. Please don't say that because that part of me is hurt. The other part of me, the philologist, agrees with you. So I'm like, I have two personalities. But you're absolutely, see, Bruno, what I was talking about before, because Bruno asked me about the differences in philology and linguistics, and I said, I'm
Yes.
you.
Yes. Elaborate a bit, Evina, please, on that. I know you told us the difference, but just as it seems like between you two, obviously you understand more what you mean when you say
Yeah.
why a linguist and a philologist are like in kind of different two departments. Can you explain to us a bit, Evina, just not?
Yeah, I'll also I'll also add to what Ammon said that it was so much denser in Greek. So a good example of that is that I bet that's in every language that when you get like um, a book, edited book of ancient Greek texts, with the translation to another language, almost always, please, correct me if I'm wrong, you probably have a lot more experience than that. The ancient Greek text is like half page, and the translation next to it is like a full page and a half. And you're like, wait, isn't that line by line? Also, it's multiple sentences. So the period in ancient Greek has like a main verb, but on that main verb, we have many ideas hanging from it that in a modern language can only be explained by multiple periods because you cannot follow up such a long sentence. So it's exactly what you said before, right?
Yes, it's not a dance, right? In those languages, it's not a dance anymore. In the Greek, it's a dance, and you're taking in the whole thing in your mind at once. I had a
Memorization, the use of brain. They were
yes,
memorizing thousands of verses to perform the Homeric epics.
yes,
So
yeah, and
why
that's
wouldn't they be able to hold 5 tabs at the same time until they get to the verb?
correct, correct. And that's why when you mentioned that when you get a translation, it's always longer. The translation is longer than the
Hilarious.
original. It's because the people, and that's completely standard, the people are struggling to be able to take a complexity and bring it into an in one case English, right? Into an English form. So they have to line up these. Oh God, it's awful, people. It's awful. You don't you can take this from an understanding. If you really want it in perspective, think of one word. We have oistromania in ancient Greek, which is this craziness caused by the sting of the gadfly. Okay, right? Listen to how much English I had to put into that.
Oh my
Right?
word.
Whereas that one word is capturing that concept, which none of us in English have thought about. What does, when you get bitten, you're the horse out in the field, and when you get bitten by that gadfly, what is the response that you have in your spirit to that gadfly? You have the oistromania. How is that oistromania? How is that exactly what the spirit of oracular prophecy produces? Why are the prophets, the oracles, why are those dancers in states of oistromania? And how is it that the Christos, that application of a drug, leads to oistromania? How is it that you cannot express these concepts except in a whole bunch of English words?
Can
And
I jump in there because you gave me the amazing example to use to answer the question of Bruno about the linguist and the philologist. So a philologist is exactly what you say, admires and respects that idea that with one word you can describe a whole concept. Maybe a linguist will say, yes, but you can still express it. It doesn't matter if it is one word of a whole phrase. Does that make sense, Bruno? So it's not that you
Yes,
don't
yes.
respect the language, but you say, well, you can still say it in other words in another language.
Mm. And
If that makes sense.
yes, 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 absolutely.
Sorry,
It's
sorry,
more like it's it's like, but does the actual word philology implies in his actual meaning of it, but what it will mean in Greek philologist, because we like it's the logos and philo, I guess, and I guess the whole concept implies a relationship with the logos,
with
let's say.
language. Yeah.
So
Well,
from maybe from a linguist, it will be more about, I don't know how to explain it, but maybe there is a word in Greek or ancient Greek for what will be a linguist, and it will be a linguist back then than a philologist.
let me answer that one by saying what you need to read are the people who study and write about the grammata. That's what we're really dealing with, right? You have all of these ancient works of ancient Greeks writing about their own language. They're writing about how to use it. Like, where do you think the first the lexicon, the concept of a lexicon comes from those Greeks, right? Who are who are creating this understanding, this philology, you would call it, um, how the language is working, how the words are working. And my God, man, um, in a lexicon, oh God, I'll think of his name in a second, but in one of our lexica, Hesychius, it is Hesychius, I think it is. He talks about he gives us a lexicon of the unusual words in Greek, and in Alpha alone, there's like 10,000 entries. So that's 10,000 just unusual words defined. And remember, when he's defining the word, he has to come up with a way to define it. So it's like an exercise. The grammarians are the source of really this. It's like the science of the language, and it's really when you talk about linguistics, it's being pioneered by these Greeks. I mean, it's just it's the way it is. It's gorgeous.
It's just, Bruno, that when we started talking about the ancient times, we were not using the word grammatistis, grammarian, or philologist at all. We were using mostly the word scholars, maybe. So we were replacing that word in Greek. So that's why we can't trace back to what they really were, grammarians. So that is why we're disconnected. That's why probably they ask Ammon or me, what is it that you do? What does that mean? Philologist, what is it? Are you a philosopher? Well, I take it sometimes because they're thought to be smart. So, well, it depending on the context. Sometimes I say yes, sometimes no.
Yeah, sometimes there's right.
I'm a philosopher. Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that was the first, and with the first thing that we published with Ammon, the first question I had was, "What is philology?" Yeah, because it's like not many people actually know.
You know what? I would like to define it now as that spark that we just saw, right? What is the tragedy? Why are we drawn to tragedy? There is something in it that feeds us. That there's a reason they're always invoking the muse, Greek speakers. I don't care where they're from in antiquity, and they're from all over the place. There is something that Greek speakers have with this notion of that invocation of the muse, right? You really don't understand it. People think, oh, it's just a nice thing to start off a song. You pray to a muse, an invisible being, to show you the reality. People don't understand the sophisticated mechanics that are behind it, because who are those muses? They're the daughters of memory, right? The daughters of memory. And everything that these poets, remember, all of this written stuff is coming, like, where's it coming from? Look at the early lyric poets, man, right? Look at Homer. These are songs. These are kitharodes. This is language that is accompanied by music. And by the way, they invented the fucking lyre. Am I wrong? Did they not invent the fucking guitar?
They did. But also, it's interesting how there are muses that inspire you to study history, because the word muse makes us think of music, right? Isn't that right? Yeah, of course, there were muses of dance, muses of song making, but there were muses that supposedly inspired you to write or to tell history or astronomy.
Yes, to inquire.
Yes,
actually, to inquire. This is what it's all about, the great inquiry.
Sorry, Ammon.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, for you to know, Ammon, because we were speaking before for like an hour and a half, and we talked about this. So it's great that for for us here, hearing both of you talking about it, because we have been talking with you before about this. Now with Evina, this is, you just met right now, so for us it's a privilege to have you both here. Like,
For me, it's a privilege to be here with them.
Evina, can I ask you, have you had much of a chance to look at any of the medical or drug stuff, or any of the like weird sources like the Theriacs and stuff like that from Nicander? Have you had any sort of, has any of that kind of stuff come up in the past? Because traditionally, the reason I ask that is traditionally that stuff is not taught in at least American universities. It's
Well,
not taught in classics departments. So you kind of have to specialize. Have you come across any of that stuff along the way?
you're right. It is not taught not only in the US, but nowhere in the world, I think. Maybe you're one of the few people that have the privilege to analyze these texts. But to be honest with you, I feel privileged to have studied classics because at any moment I feel I have easy access because I understand ancient Greek. I have easy access to any text. However, I have, because at the same time I'm working on a project, etymological project that really, really fascinates me. It's that side of me that is a philologist, that part of me, from the dual personality that I have. So it's a project I call You Already Speak Greek, and it explores the etymological origins and the historical development of certain words that are used in ancient Greek texts, and that have survived up until today. And these words are only taken out of the world of human emotions. So words that we use today, like melancholy or nostalgia, these are just two examples. There are so many more, euphoria and so on. And I explore what they meant in the original texts and how they have survived today, if they still have the same meaning, like nostalgia. That was not really mentioned. It was a later text that talks about nostalgia, but it was very well described, nostos and algos in Homer. They're very, very close there in the first verses of Odyssey, like one line below one from the other.
Yes.
But still, these concepts, how they have traveled through time and how we use them today. So in one of these explorations I took, I read a bit more of Hippocrates. And I love how the word melancholy, which is used in plural, melancholies, in his text, air, water, and places, if that's translation in English.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not wrong on that in the translation. So there he speaks about the bile and how people that tend to be more, I'll say that, well, yeah, they're more prone, let's say, to have melancholies if the weather is drier during a year. So the idea is how the climate affects the human body. So I haven't really done a thorough study in all medical texts, but when it is an investigation that I need to do for a certain reason, I feel fortunate to be able to access the texts and read, obviously, the important work of many philologists that analyze these texts, and they give me an insight and a layer extra than the one that I would get linguistically, if that makes sense. So, yeah, I don't have like a long relationship with the medical text, but I'm very
Ammon,
interested in that.
oh, sorry, Evina. Ammon, just because this is a perfect word that you choose to make an example, because we talked about this word from the perspective of Ammon. Like, I don't remember when, but we talked about Ammon. Do you remember? Like the way that in the medical like the way that they were approached in a medical way to the person that is suffering from this melancholy. Would you, from your research, Ammon, would you give us like an idea of that?
Yeah, so right out of the Hippocratic corpus, you have the humoral, they call it humoral pathology, right? That we hear being described. And one of those imbalances that you can get is of the black bile. And that's why melancholia is the disease that affects the person who is entering into this, yes, weather driven, right? Weather influences it, diet influences it, right? And the Galen is so involved with the diagnosis of melancholics and the treatment of melancholics. He's got drug regimen to treat them and everything. That he writes an entire work on black bile, and on melancholy. And in that work, he talks about how the black bile can also influence the eruption of plagues, right? Skin problems you can have ultimately connected to the melancholy. And how do you treat this abundance of black bile? Well, it's, through these different drugs that will affect your moistness, your dryness, or your heat and your cold. So it all comes back to one thing. And I had to translate, by the way, for my master's thesis. It was a translation of Galen's Black Bile. So I'm not pulling any of this out of my backside. These are real texts. You can go and look at them, right? So part of the black bile issue is its effects on what we would say is psychology, right? Depression. You call it. Well, they were talking about depression, right? Well, yes, kind of, but in a broader
It was
picture, like
corporal still. It wasn't that of a mental state yet. It took a while. Aristotle maybe mentioned that again, the word melancholy, and it started giving it a different context. We're still talking about something that appears in the body. It took years to think of melancholy as Freud thought about it, as a
right,
type
ultimately,
of psychic, right?
right.
A type of personality, let's say.
Which is almost like, well, we couldn't quite grasp the Greek concept in its whole. So here we're going to take a little side aspect of it and say, okay, now we're talking about a mental process of depression, blah, blah, blah. And we're going to call that melancholy. Yeah, no, there's a whole, it's much more integrated. The world of ancient medicine is much more integrated with, like you were saying, weather, airs, waters, places. Why is what what is the water and air, the air I'm breathing and the water that I'm drinking? What does that have to do with my state of health and whether or not there's going to be an epidemic this year? Right? I mean, it's complicated, gorgeous science that I find myself reading it just having to hang on. When Galen talks about drugs, drugs that are used in the treatment of melancholy, he talks about drugs that are used with sex problems with sexual dysfunction. It's wait a minute. Is this? I've even read. It wasn't Galen, but it was one of the. I think it was a Byzantine, Paul of Aegina, maybe, who's writing about the treatment of disorders of the mind, disorders of thinking is, I guess, is what we would call it. And in that, he talks about melancholy and again drugs that are used to treat the melancholic state. And there's an overlap between those treatments and sexual dysfunction treatments. So the material is advanced, and all you can come away from that with, at least me, I don't know, is that you're trying to use an operating system to comprehend a much more advanced system than you're capable of. And if you had these one word concepts that they come up with, that are compounds, that they've put this whole ladder of words together, the ones that usually in our dictionaries or lexica are modern English lexica, right? Or from 1850s or LSJ. Sometimes they'll just put, we don't know what this is. Like, let me ask about this one. The verb bachewo, to become Bacchic, right? What the hell does that mean? There's no, in English, when they translate that into English,
There's no little Scott can explain
Can
it.
can we? Well, so I have an idea of what I want to ask you both, but can we just make a small?
Bruno,
Okay, yeah,
can I
please,
make a
Evina.
comment that that was exactly what I was saying. It's not only the concepts that they came up with, it's this abstract phonemes that put in that order to create the word whatever, arete, paideia, call it whatever. How did you decide it's called paideia and not ABC?
right.
Like, this is the incredible thing, not only the concept, but the creation of words. And I agree in everything that you said, Ammon. We're both amazed by the same things. Sorry, Bruno.
Yeah.
That's okay. You gave me a bit of order in my mind also, because I wanted to go like, oh, let's talk about Bakewo, and but which we all love, and but we were talking before, Ammon, about the pre-Socratic and Socratic idea. Like, I was obviously asking about if this was just to time frame something, and well, we are understanding that not, because I also asked you before, and Evina was telling me that there is different, obviously, ways of seeing or make philosophy or something like that. But we were in the middle of it a bit, so I guess it's connected because we are talking about these concepts, difficult to give you an idea of what is this, of what is that. And as we mentioned, the pre-Socratic way of thinking, I guess it's connected with how complex the language can get to talk about what they were talking, like a science of trying to explain what is how the earth was formed or whatever. So could we take again, Evina, from what we were talking about, this way of thinking of the pre-Socratic, and then we go into the Socratic? Can we do you remember where? Not that you don't need it to do it from the same part that we were before, like just as you want.
I was just talking, I'll try to remember what I said, but maybe, yeah, it was a comment that I made that, yeah, even the word pre-Socratic is not how they called themselves, obviously. It was given to them a lot later in the 19th century, maybe by Herman Diels, if I'm not wrong. So they were not calling themselves pre-Socratic, obviously, because that's not a way to define yourself. And obviously, that doesn't mean that necessarily they came chronologically before the Socratics, because some of the pre-Socratic philosophers were contemporary to Socratics. And also the idea that we use pre-Socratic, as I said before to Bruno, to me, is like, say, I don't know, using the word Socratic to define someone else. It makes me think that it's a bit offensive to them. It makes us think of them as inferior to Socrates because they came before Socrates. Also, the word philosophers. Are they really philosophers? Yeah, they influenced philosophy in many ways, but they were not calling themselves philosophers. They were, at most, I will call them inquirers, thinkers that had a very vast, let's say, portfolio of topics.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's a much better way to describe them as natural philosophers than philosophers, because
Yeah,
all of their
absolutely.
works are about the basics of nature and how the physics.
Naturalism.
You could also, I mean, I'd be happy to call them physicists, as opposed to, Yeah, you're right about pre-Socratic, right? Who made that up, right? Right. Yeah. Gorgeous. Harmony. One of the things they're coming up with is harmony. What do you study if you derive harmony? Like, what is harmony mathematically, and and just the
In
concept? Why don't,
cosmos
yeah,
as well. Yeah.
it's mind blowing. You see, we're both the same junkies. We're smoking the same ancient dope, man. It's gorgeous. Oh God, go ahead. What? I'm sorry I interrupted, but
No,
you're
please
exactly right.
don't do that to me. I feel
But
so honored you're here.
yes, but Evina, I would love to take it from you just said cosmos, and that was the actual word we were on it when we were
You're
speaking about.
right.
Okay, we understand pre-Socratic. We don't we don't care about the name of the
More
definitions
science, yeah, thinkers, inquirers.
and
Mm.
what they were talking about. What was the inquiry that they were doing? I know it's very broad, probably, but
Yeah.
can we? Okay.
So of course, so they talked about the origins of the external world. They were looking for where this world came from. The way in modern times we talked about the Big Bang, right? How did we start having air, water around us, soil? Where did that come from? And some people may say, well, that's a theological inquiry, religious one, because back then they thought that the gods would give order in the world, and its god was responsible for other parts of the world, like Demetra, for the crops. So that's where we get food from. But for the philosophers, the pre-Socratic philosophers, I'll use that term just for this podcast, the pre-Socratic philosophers, were looking for what started the world. They were looking for the seed. Was it water that started the world? Was it fire? What was it that started this world? And this is an exploration for the material principle of things, the arche, the beginning of this world. So there we have many ideas that would be called today that would fall under the category of science, as Ammon said, right? Of course, we have some other ideas like the impermanence of the world from Heraclitus, everything flows, that he said. We have other people talking about how strange it is to think of gods as people, Xenophanes, the anthropomorphism of gods, making them look like they're anthropos, people, yeah, how they drink and eat like people do, or how they have weaknesses in their personalities, or yeah, how they act and think. Because in all the texts that we get in Homer, for example, gods are a big part of the Homer epics, and they're described as humans. So then we have the pre-Socratic philosophers questioning that. And of course, a lot more work on numbers with Pythagoras. That's where we get Pythagoras theorem in maths. We have the atomism in Democritus. We have very important work. They set, I would say, the foundations for the scientific investigation nowadays. And of course, they were the inspiration for Western philosophy, like naturalism, that everything is governed by natural rules and laws, rationalism, and other things. That's what made us give them the name of philosophers, probably. But they have done a lot of work in other aspects other than philosophy, because nowadays we think of philosophy as something different to science. So that's why I'm saying that with our modern criteria, we cannot think of philosophy and science as one thing.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. And a perfect follow-up is the medicine is related in the same way. What we'd call the pre-Socratic philosophy is bleeding into creating for us questions of medicine. And well, if this is what's happening on a level that we cannot see, then how is that applying to the medicine? What are the things that we cannot see, for example, in drug action, which they used to use the word epangelia, which is very close to evangelia, right? The gospel. What is the efficacy of the drug? That's how the doctors are referring to it. What is its gospel? Right? And the basis for the doctors trying to understand how the pharmacy, what we call the pharmacy, is working, is coming from that pre-Socratic natural inquiry. And some of them are actually physicians as well. And people don't realize that, for example, the probably the most brilliant of, I don't know, tell me if I'm wrong, but if you just look at Pythagoras, for example, just look at Pythagoras. People think he's a mathematician. Like, what do you call him? He's a mathematician. He's a
Yeah, it's
philosopher.
called.
He's right. He's coming up with geometry, but nobody knows that he was a physician. Nobody knows that. I don't know how that managed to get washed out of the history. But Empedocles, same thing. These people are practicing physicians who are, we kind of look at them as like weird, magic using. They're almost like shaman kind of people. So is it fair to call them philosophers, right? Man, you're exactly right, Evina. It's us trying with our barbarian operating system, trying to reassemble something that's much more complex than we can really digest.
And Damon, okay, so if we add the ingredient of medicine also to these ideas of like this is the cosmos, where we are questioning stuff that came from before, like you were saying, Evina, and now we add this ingredient of medicine. Could we say that all of these different stuff that were just one idea of what the cosmos is, I guess, or something like that, was what was creating actually these inquiries, like in itself? Let's say what I'm trying to ask Ammon is like, you think medicine or the drug use or the physicist practice was actually making them engaging more with trying to answer these questions more than another topic that you can choose, as a human?
I can't answer why. I can't tell you why it happened, but we can show just through the literary evidence that there is some sort of renaissance, some sort of classical renaissance that's coming to us through the Greek. I mean, our renaissance, medieval, it's just a reflection. It's a renaissance because of that Greek original. But what I'm trying to say is that Greek original, and I think it is language bound, right? There are not other Mediterranean cultures that are outside of the Greek speaking world that are deriving these very same concepts. It's not happening. There is a spark that is happening in the Greek world, that is Greek speaking world, that is facilitating their ability to create the science, to see how all the mechanics work. So a physician, for example, we talked about Pythagoras. If Pythagoras is going around healing and he's performing purgations with drugs, and these healings affect the person's soul, what is he? Is he religious? Is he a religious figure? Is he a physician? Is he a scientist? And the answer is yes. The fact that you can't see that he can be all of those things at once is why Pythagoras is walking around telling people a squared plus b squared equals c squared, which you know for damn sure, if you were to walk up to a modern day physician and tell them to derive some geometry or calculus they're going to tell you, oh, look, I just took the basics of what I could to get my grade and get out of basic calculus. They're not thinking as the Greek was allowing Pythagoras to think. right? Um, there's a reason that we have this strange idea of why the Greeks could perform calculus. How could they do? Didn't they have to derive certain? No, no, no. It's coming through the language itself. I have a collection of Greek mathematical works, right? And in those Greek mathematical works, basic calculus is explained, integrals is explained, not with conceptual images, not with calculations, but with words. It's almost as if the Greek gave the world a superior ability to deconstruct the world and then reconstruct it in the form of these visions of tragedy and all of these things like that. Because we're talking about pre-Socratics and the medicine and the wisdom, the science that's in it. But remember, this is all, when we get to the stage, we're in the same place because the stage in Athens is a religious operation where the public is purged, right? We're performing sacrifices of incense. We're burning incense. We're entering into that, right? Again, is it medical? Is it theatrical? Right? Yes. The answer is yes. And it's my opinion. Evina, you chime in, tell me what you think. But it's my opinion that it's the language that's driving that reality. Let me give you one more example. In
Please.
With Aeschylus, when we have the population of a city that's being oppressed somehow with what you and I would call bad news, what they do is they create sacrifice of incense in order in that they have specifically prepared with Christing, the process of Christing. It's very specific. In order to affect the population as a whole, they're fumigating the city is in order to allow them to react to bad news. And my question is, at what level are these people operating that they have no distinction between when we go to Sunday to our church and we sit in our church and we make our signs and we take our communion? That has nothing to do with hospital. It has nothing to do with the practice of medicine. But in antiquity, it is everything. A purgation, whether it's your purgation for your crimes, right? Whatever those are, your moral failures, a purgation of that in an assembly, a religious assembly, is a theater. That is a doctor's visit, right? Those purgations that Galen is writing about, where do you think they're getting all that knowledge from? Why is he going to the priestess of Artemis on Limnos to get 20,000 pills, or how many ever thousand pills it was, of her drug to take to prescribe to the people of Rome? Why are they using a religious drug on people in Rome? Because it's not religious. That oracle, that priestess, she's functioning in multi realms at once, right? All the knowledge. That's why Plutarch is talking. He's talking to a priestess to get all of this knowledge, right? To be, I don't know.
Sorry, Ammon, and sorry, Evina. I'm just a little small because we were talking with Evina about also that the oracle and how and now it connects a lot because it's a wider view of the world, I guess. Because Evina was telling us that the oracle will be highly educated from even 0 years. You will be prepared for it. Nothing was above it, kind of thing. So, so I
Yeah, the word of the oracle was very important and respected by everyone. Yeah.
So I guess it relates with medicine also. So the oracle will, if you were giving this example, Ammon, about Galen, we're talking about another time frame, I guess now, but Galen was going to Lemnos to take some prescription or some drugs or some medicines to bring to Rome that were being made. I mean, this priestess was doing it. So we can see again how this religious stuff will be related with medicine also.
Yeah, this priestess, hey, hang on, this priestess is not actually out there doing it. She has an army of people that she oversees in the process of collecting and forming the final product, which is called the Limnian seal. Everybody in the fucking Mediterranean knows about it. And it's used in multiple prescriptions. So that's why Galen goes and gets thousands of Limnian seals. And that seal is a reference to her own image that is branded on the trochiskoi, these little pills that they make. And that image is impressed on it. So you can know, oh, this is true Limnian, right? It's Limnian. They call it Limnian earth is the street name. You've got to get some Limnian earth. And that priestess is overseeing an operation that's a very large, sophisticated operation that Galen can go and pick up thousands of these pills. Remember, nobody else can make this stuff. The knowledge of it is preserved with that priesthood.
So it will be like she has the knowledge, and the people is working through that knowledge that she has because of that she's education.
Just like processing of the purple, right? There's all sorts of people involved in processing it. So yeah, it's an operation.
Okay. And so I have this idea, if both of you don't mind, which is like we talked a bit at the beginning, Evina, but we left it for the end. We said to us the meaning of the word or concept even, or figure or title, I don't know, of Medusa. And you told us it was protector or guardian or something like that. Can we open this discussion about this Medusa idea with what you were saying at the beginning, Evina, and then we chat about, please.
So yeah, well, it was a different context we were talking about. That's an interesting idea that Ammon mentioned as well. I think it runs through philology as a concept. The people that are amazed by philology, how many times in Greek texts, I'll call them texts, it can be anything, prose, poetry, whatever. We have heroes, protagonists of myths called in certain names that etymologically describe how these heroes are. So Medusa, so there my question was, and still a question, and Ammon, you're welcome to answer it. Is it the chicken that does the egg, or the hen comes from the egg? How do we decide that lady, Medusa, is going to be called Medusa, which means the guardian of the Temple of Athena, of many other ideas, feminist included ideas of that could be used as interpretation of that myth of Medusa? Do we put that name later, or because of the name we get inspired for the myth? Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
It does, and I wish I knew. I wish I knew.
Me
and
too.
That's
what I said.
I'm such a careful classicist that I'm perfectly happy to think about which came first, the chicken or the egg in that case. But at the same time, I'm limited. I know unless I find an ancient source, like a grammarian who says, and I haven't, I've read lots of grammarians and I haven't seen it. I can go look for it now, though, see if we can dredge something up. But yeah, why do you call Hermes the Medusa? Why is he the one who's under in a certain passage is characterizes that one who brings the safety of the government, that one who brings the safety of the ruling powers. I mean, that one who's really driving those medusae that end up really driving temple activity. When they say I read a Greek source, and forgive me, I've read so many Greek sources, I've forgotten more than I've read. I've forgotten more than most people have read, I should say. A Greek source was, and maybe you'll recognize this, Evina. A Greek source said dragons and wolves are the guardians of the temples, the ones who really are involved with whatever the temple is doing, and however it's processing, however it's functioning, whatever pragmata it's producing, right? It's praxis. And when I read that, I was like, oh shit. So all those times I've seen those references to the wolves at this temple, wolves associated with the temple. Why are they using wolf iconography? Oh God, it just came flooding to me. So in the Medusa chicken and egg, was there a priestess of the temple of Athena? That's what we have. We have a priestess of the temple of Athena who was murdered in different ways, murdered, whatever you can put it. She's the origin of that thing, that hideous skin of Zeus's nurse, who's a woman, by the way. That skin has the head of that Medusa affixed to it. And that's the image that we are using as a defense, we who worship the Virgin on the hill. I mean, which came first? Did that priestess come first, or did the idea that we have in Mother Greek of what a priest, what that priestess would be doing, how she would be functioning? Right. I think it's the same thing in Maya. If you look at the name for Maya in Greek, it really just means to act as a midwife. So which came first, the midwife? And they called her Maya. Maybe that was her name, right? Oh, God.
I had the same
Yeah.
question, Bruno. I was telling you the same things before. This is the magic of ancient Greek. What comes first, the concept or the name? Well, it doesn't matter at the end of the day. We're lucky to have both the concept and the name of whatever it is. But I can't be calm unless I know the actual truth, what came first. So that's, I think, a drive for many philologists, if I'm not wrong. All of it comes down to the language. Why did we put that name? When did we come up with that name? The chicken and the egg thing you were saying, Ammon. Absolutely.
I think what you said about English and the project you're working on, your modern English or other modern languages. Look, you've got to look back to Mother Greek because you mentioned euphoria, and that is such a perfect example. Ecstasy, I think, is another good example. Imagine they were able
It's
to
in the
come up
list.
with. Imagine they were able to coin and come up with a concept that you and I think of ecstatic, except it's bigger. It's not exactly what you and I think of it. It's bigger in antiquity. It's associated with cult activity. It's associated with a process of entering into communication with a divinity. Right? Right. When you and I say, now you and I sit around and we're like ecstasy. Well, that's a specific drug, but yeah, it kind of means this like place where you can go on a drug. Do you see how we've, oh God, isn't that the dope? That's the dope.
I agree. We're like the nerd association here.
You
Absolutely.
should totally continue that project. You should write something. You should do some computer analysis on it or something using all your linguistic training. You know what I mean? Because you've got them. Linguistics really gives you the mathematical kind of backing of all the language. We can sit around and, as you know, in classical philology, and get stoned all day on the beauty, right? Your other personality wants that math and wants that very logical explanation of what's going on. And if you can show the world, are you going to show the world then that what they're speaking is like a dumbed down version of this beautiful Greek original?
Ancient Greek, in its form that we studied today, is maths. The syntax of ancient Greek is mathematical. It is connected. You cannot like ancient Greek without liking order and maths, generally speaking, maths, logic, let's call it, okay, better called as logic, not maths like 1 plus 1, obviously. So yeah, I mean, I would be very interested to continue the project. I find that many people use words today and they have no transparency to the etymology. And yeah, of course, in the case of melancholia, or melancholy, whatever you call it, in whatever pronunciation you want, it's the same. Yeah, it's changed a lot, but there are other words, other concepts that the core of them is the same. And it's beautiful for people that don't have this native ability that, because for me, it's very easy to see the etymology. Someone tells me nostalgia, and I know already what it means. The pain, the effort you need to put to go back, or the feeling of missing your home. It can be many things, right?
Right,
Like
right.
endless things. So I feel like it's a nice project, and thank you for using these words that I should continue. It's very nice to have that support and of a fellow and a great philologist like yourself, who can at least see what my intentions are with this project.
Don't say great philologist. Oh God, don't. Nemesis, she's sitting right over there. She's gonna hear it, and I'm gonna make some giant blunder, and everybody's gonna say, "Oh God, this is what a great philologist is." No, people. One thing I need you to understand, the audience now, right? That we both understand is that Greek is so beautiful and so beautifully mathematically, geometrically, reasonably complex that every time we're in her presence, we're humbled. And our goal is to become so intimate with her that we have that constant familiarity, that constant dope that you get from the language, because it's an addiction. Once you start reading classical Greek, it gets into your system somehow. You're willing to sacrifice. You know, Evina, you could have made a lot more money as a lawyer or something. If you can do classical Greek, you could have done law. You could have, you could be making the big bucks right now. But you've had the crack, and you know that this stuff is addictive and it's gorgeous and it could change the world, right? Evina sees that you're speaking modern languages that are drawing from that gorgeous, gorgeous well, and she's going to bring that vision to the world, and that's what she's a post-Socratic philosopher.
But what I mean also is that we have different starting points in the sense that you covered a lot more to be able to read these texts. For me, it was a lot easier because I I had this innate curiosity about etymology. Like in my free time as a kid, I was reading the dictionary. Please. I mean, that's
Oh
not normal.
God, that is
So that's
so
what I'm saying. We don't
beautiful.
have the same starting point. Yeah, I'll
That is
finish
so
quickly my
people.
homework to read the dictionary. But the point is that you had to learn a language from scratch,
Yeah,
and it's very difficult to learn ancient Greek
right,
if you don't speak modern Greek,
right.
and vice versa.
Right. No, no. You've got a
I guess.
leg up. You've got a leg up. Right. Definitely you've got a leg up. And especially if you come from bog trotting English, right? English is not conducive, right? And you think, oh, wait a minute, English borrows so many forms. Yeah, why do you think English borrows 30% to 40% of its own native forms, right? That you think are native English words? Why is it borrowing those from Greek? Why is it doing it? Because it doesn't have the capacity. It's how my brain was set up. And you've got to sit humbly and look at the Greek and say, oh my God, if I can, I'm going to take this in. And there are times that we go to class. You know how this works. We go to class, and you can spend sometimes an entire 50-minute class on 5 lines, right? And it's not because, oh, it's Aristotle and his note style of writing is poopy. It's nothing like that. It's because it's somebody like the author of the work on the great poetess, the Bacchic poetess, starts, oh God, Lycophron. The great work by Lycophron, the Alexandra, or whatever you want to call it, that's about a prophetic Bacchic priestess, right? Cassandra. It's about her. It's her words that come out. And I swear to you, people, I swear to you, you cannot spend less than an hour on 5 lines of this thing. The entire work is that way. Why? Because Lycophron is making up vocabulary. He is creating words. Every fifth word is some goddamn unknown, never seen it, doesn't exist anywhere in any other text. It's not just the Hopox, it's his own. He's made it. He's fine-tuned a word. So what do you have to do? You have to look at the word that he invented. You have to look at it in its context, which is way crazy esoteric and hard to understand, right? References that you don't know, people you don't know, nobody that's in this myth. Boom, he inserts a fake word, right? That's now a real word. And you have to figure out what that new creation is. And the only way to do this, I stumble all the time. The only way to do this is to be able to think in that programmed, sophisticated, rational way that they're thinking. You have to think like Lycophron in order to get to the place where his words are, right? And it's so difficult. And then you can pick up, Thucydides or somebody and just plow through it. It's just right. It's just he's not making a lot of stuff up, but it's a good historical analysis. You know what I mean,
Mhm.
and whatnot. So realize that, and it takes a lot of boldness for classical scholars to step up, because to do this in front of a live audience, to be able to read what we call sight reading in front
Yeah.
of a live audience, isn't it, Evina? Isn't that hugely intimidating?
Yeah. And while you were talking, well, it's not entirely connected, but just to give an idea to the people listening, it's for anyone learning a foreign language. When I learned English, when I was taught Spanish, the teachers were saying, well, you need to think like an English speaker, you need to think like a Spanish speaker. So it's not just to do the direct translation, you need to live in this world to understand the pragmatics of how this language functions and what it creates. So it's to get into the mentality first and then understand, because you cannot understand if you don't see the context around the text. That's what I was thinking while you were talking.
The
Not,
more
not
the
very
mo-
connected, but yeah.
the more souls that you can absorb, the more of those ancient sources you read, the more you become a part of that world. And that's exact the way you described it is exactly how the translator's life kind of progresses. You become more of a native because, well, you see how these terms are used. You know what they do. You know how they refer to the bodily waste products now. You know how they look at them. They don't quite look at them like we do, right? You're gonna have to get into this world that's a little bit different. And the one thing that I like is Parthenos, right? You talk about the Virgin. You talk about the Virgin on the hill. What is the Parthenon, and what is all what the hell is a virgin? We can't even translate virgin properly. We can't even translate a virgin. I'm seeing virgins here that in the text it's an age group, right? It's not has nothing to do with the status of your hymen, right? Which
Nothing
by
with
the way
shape.
is a
Yeah.
Greek
Yeah.
word, right? It's a Greek word. I'll give them that, right? But the point is, the more you see what a virgin is, the more you see what something very basic and simple, like you'd think something like sweat would be simple. I can't tell you how many times I've been reading in physicians about sweat. and about how it, did you know they view it as a pharmacological product, just like a milk that you would take from the opium poppy? Oh my
And I didn't
God.
know. And I
Yes. Yes.
didn't
So
really want to find out about that. But now it's said, it's in the air.
no, it's you produce it yourself too. And when the devil tries to attract Eve, he uses his own sweat. It's not illogical. It is an ingredient in aphrodisiacs, right? I mean, if you think of it, what is it? Are they trying to use the pheromones or something in the sweat? I mean, we don't do this kind of thing, right? So, and we don't have ichor either, right? We have
Oh, but they
blood.
survived until medieval times. Recipes in witches, yeah, absolutely. The sweat of a dragon. I mean, in tales and folk stories. Yeah, you're right.
Don't you love it? Bruno, you wanted to ask something and I've interrupted. What was the question you were going to ask?
No, I just was fascinated listening to your
Me
conversation. I
too.
guess this was the whole point of it. I guess like for you to, because it's also an experiment we're doing, which is like you just met each other, so there is topics that we're, that's the way. We didn't prepare anything. We have two um, experts talking about what we are inquiring as amateurs.
One expert and one fan. Sorry. Yeah.
And so yes, well, we are approaching the 3 hours with Evina. So Evina, thank you very much. And but I would like to make a question that I think I'm gonna ask all the time. I asked Ammon this like 10 times, but all the time we get the same, but a bit more with it, which is about this concept, name, God, or we don't know. Actually, that's what I'm getting. That we don't know what Bacchus is. So, as last idea or one of the last ideas, um, can we approach to this? I know this was not in the overview, Evina, but just like a spontaneous question about who is Bacchus or what is this idea of Bacchus? Not in Roman times, like before, where the word comes from.
Can I just ask why you've talked about that multiple times? Why has that come up? Sorry, but you started your question like that, and I was like, I was expecting something different. I don't know. But can I please get an explanation on that and why Ammon has different approaches?
So with different, even in the Hellenistic collective, that was the way that I connect with Evina. I asked multiple persons because we were being invited to lectures, and this other person that was an expert on arts, classical arts, and all of this. So to all of them, we have been asking, we have been tracking this Bacchus, because I get the most answers that I get all the time is like, well, this is the god of wine of the Romans. And so but not all the time. Let's say when we track, let's say Roman times, Euripides, not the same time frame, isn't it? And we have the Bacchae or the Bacchants. So we can infer as amateurs, even not asking somebody like yourself, that the word Bacchus is older than Roman times. And it seems to be also a concept that is to become Bacchic, or the word that you mentioned before, Ammon, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah, because it was an adjective to describe Dionysus in that sense. That's what you mean, that it's way before Roman time.
Okay, I don't. Well, I don't know. So, well, in this idea that I just gave, I'm not saying any affirmations. Just what is the inquiry we're doing on my side, on our side. So, what do you think about this whole mess that I just gave you as a question? Mess. Sorry.
I think that
Ammon first. Yeah, I want to hear what
let
he
me go. Let me go
Oh,
first because I'm gonna throw out something that's different, but I think it's gonna answer the question, and then you can proceed mathematically to do it the right way. The two things that you talked about, you know, Euripides, and then later a Roman Bacchus, right? What do the two have in common? Bacchus is the power that's coming into the city to fucking disrupt things, right? It's going to cause problems and it's going to cause people to do things that are out of their normal daily activities. What are these things? The women are going to go up into the mountains and they're going to be performing rites. And there are murders that are associated with. We have accounts of women coming into towns and taking the children. Like what the hell, man? It looks like they're taking kids captive. They do
anarchy, chaos.
right. They're
Yeah.
causing, and these are women who are free and slaves, right? We see that in the same situation in the Greek speaking world that we do in the Latin speaking world. The Romans come right up against it with a Bacchic group of women who create a conspiracy. They go out and arrest them and kill them. And one of the things that Livy tells us, one of the reasons they took them, that they arrested them, was based on the drugs that they had that were used in Bacchic ritual. That's in our historians. So the similarity, if you want to know what Bacchilwo, I am Bacchic, what that means, because that's how they're translated in the ALSJ, to act in a Bacchic way, right? When you enter that Bacchic state, whether it's in Thebes or whether wherever it is, it doesn't matter where it is. Wherever it is, you're going to end up with a disruption of the government. You're going to end up with some kind of idea that people, whether they're free or slave, have the obligation to go do these rites. And it's not just anybody, right? It's everybody from slaves up to the people who are ruling, right? The rulership, right? All of the caste of prophets, those people, right? So I think that to become Bacchic, I don't know what it means, but I can see that it always ends up in some kind of conflict, like some, war kind of situation. Is that why our longest epic on Bacchus by Nonus, is that why it's about this massive war between the Greek speaking world and the Indian world? Is that why? Right? Who we call Indians because of the Greek? Right? I mean, it's weird. It's like the influence of the culture that comes from Mother Greek is dominating the world. I mean, it's weird. Okay, that was my answer. Now,
No, but it's
go
very
ahead.
interesting that you mentioned the conflict, because, yeah, conflict can be in many contexts. So, in that sense, where you have a well-governed city-state, and then we have the Bacchic festivals, almost called them festivals, that occur, and the absolute chaos. So this is a contradiction, a conflict between order and lack of order. And that is, in ancient Greece at least, correct me if I'm wrong, is connected directly to god Dionysus. And we have many other festivals connected to him. So is that disruption? Is that that disruption in order, that of course, yeah, it survived as a concept, as you said, in Latin as well. But yeah, it doesn't come from Latin. We already have Bacchic um, rights way before
Right,
about the
exactly.
I'm
existence of
sorry.
Latin.
Yes, perfect. I guess that was what my my question was going. Like,
No, I agree
I don't know, it's a
100%.
fascination with time frames. I don't know why, but it gives you a
I
bit of
I think
order.
I
But
think what Evina just said.
Mhm.
Can I interrupt you? I'm sorry. I think what
Just
Evina
go.
just said is so important. It's so important because remember, Bruno, we were talking about how the theater is purging the population. If you don't bring in Dionysus, you get, in order to purge your population, you get a Bacchic reaction. You get a some kind of violent Bacchic ecstasy that takes things over. It's almost like, okay, you can do this naturally, and
Yeah,
you can set up this orchestra, right? You can set up so that the people, while the priest of Dionysus is sitting there right in the middle of everybody can experience this purgation. Is that what it means to be Bacchic? Is that what? Yeah, and the Romans just got to a point where that phenomenon, that natural phenomenon of that Bacchic revolt kicks in. When you're not bringing that Dionysiac purification through theater or through whatever venue, medium, then you're going to get a Bacchic kickback. The reason I'm really excited about saying this is because they have this thing called third time, so that you're Bacchic third time. So one of the big Bacchic festivals is every third year, right? It's every third. Why are they doing it? The oracle switches from an Apollonian oracle to a Bacchic oracle. And it just makes me think, is there some kind of sacred, physics, math going on here? I mean, the center, we're trying to figure out what is it to become Bacchic, right? And you mention the theaters, and all of a sudden you realize, oh God, it is religion, medicine, it is government, it is the same thing. What if
yeah,
we've been
all
looking at
comes
it?
back to what you said before. Yeah, absolutely. It's connected. Sorry, I interrupted you, but it's exactly the essence of what we talked about before, medicine and theater and religion, religious practices today. What are they today? What were they back then? So it's really the root of what you're saying, 100%.
Okay, so we know that comes from before Roman times. Okay, Dionysus, and in text, like in evidence, um, can we trace this back like to Bronze Age, even like this Bacchic
I,
idea?
I would say, I would say because it's in linear B, right? You've got Dionysos, right? Dionysus. You've got that in linear B already. So uh, I would say the practice itself, the purgation itself, has to be at least as old as you see the entrance of the god. Maybe it was there were variations of the practice. Like, why is Evina, why is it that Heracles has these sacred temples that he's practicing something in, where Medea is the only one allowed, where we have sources that say Medea is the only one allowed into the actual observation of the rite, right? We we have almost from the beginning, the late Bronze Age, we have corruptions of mysteries. We have like alterations or like, little offshoots of mysteries. And I don't think we really understand. If this is the world, um, the Mycenaean world that is really, it's the oldest Greek that we've got, right? It's the oldest Greek that we've got. And if it is still preserving the name itself, Dionysus, I don't know.
It goes way back, yeah, because it's not just mentioning Euripides, it's something a lot older, as you said, because of what we have in the writings. And there are many mysteries, just to make a very general comment. And I really like the project you're working on, Bruno, with your team, because it looks into these kind of questions that are a lot broader than texts. You pose questions that are really in the heart of the ancient Greek world. How do we get these ideas? Where do they come from? What were the people thinking about these ideas back then? Did they know that Dionysus was as old as at least the writings that include their name? There are so many questions around that. So that's why I felt like it's a wonderful project, and it's a great opportunity to be able to talk about these things with Ammon. And most of all, it's great that you guys pose these questions in your project. And I feel very lucky to have been invited today here and to have the opportunity to talk about these things, and of course meet Ammon. That was like a great conversation. And I hope we didn't, I'm not sure if we were in our own bubble, philological bubble, or if things were actually understood, because we got excited many times about things. But I really hope they're understood by someone that has an interest, let's say, in philology, and they want to learn more about it and get like an introduction into this world. I really hope things were understood and we're not like
Evina,
ecstatic to use the word.
yes. Well, thank you very much to come here and talk with us. What you were just saying, yeah, that's exactly why we are on the side of our documentary that we are working on, at least for, we have been working for almost a year now, and we are seeing like we have a whole, at least this whole year. And but we decided to make this side parallel project of this history inquiry that we took from a quote that Ammon said once. I stole it and I put that on my on the name of this project. That the whole idea is that. So we did 4 chapters, 4 volumes with Ammon, introducing people from the beginning, what philology is, and we went into a bunch of different topics. And now this is an expansion of this idea that is, we are so grateful that both of you to be able to do this experiment and to have 2 persons that know what they are talking about, giving us even more points of view about all of these questions. That's why I repeat the question, you know. We have been following Bacchus since the beginning, so I keep doing it, and all the time we get different stuff, not different. I mean, if I put a clip of everything about Bacchus makes sense, I will show for both of you. Like we have different ways that you can approach it, but it's always pointing to somewhere, and a figure is appearing. So that's why I keep asking about this last question I just did to both of you. And Ammon, thank you very much to come here again. And Ammon is part of our project since the beginning. So it's been like a key figure in the whole Stones and Serpents universe. And now with you, Evina, it's exactly what we wanted, to keep pushing this forward for not just experts hear about this. I mean, it's amazing. We have a lot of people interested here in Chile now that before we started with this, nobody was even watching anything of what we were doing. But now with the congregation of Ammon's channel, they are very into it. They are studying the ancient Greek to go into the source, and for you to see for yourself. And so that's where we're trying to push forward also with the project of Stones and Serpents. So we are so grateful that both of you are here now. Thank you so much, Evina.
It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure to meet you, Evina. And I'm going to mention you on Lady Babylon because I love it when I run into another dope head, and you've seen this stuff and the project that you're working on. I think that's brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and I'm honored to be able to interact with you like this.
It works.
Thank you, and Bruno, well done, sir. Ryan, well done.
Yeah.
Both. Thank you both again.